Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room. I'm Robin Adair, and it's great to have you join us for a show that likes to look at news and views from Vancouver Island, British Columbia, across Canada. And right now we're doing a lot of BC politics, so hang on to your seat for that. And across town, my co-host with the most, John Jurisic, the Croatian sensation, as we lovingly call him on this show. And John, we've certainly had a lot of things unfolding over the last couple of weeks.
Oh my gosh, head rattling amount of activity. We've never seen anything like this. And when we say that, we've got a bit of years under our belt, you and I. A major political party like the BC Liberals changed their name to the BC United. Yeah, okay, whatever. They crumble in the opinion polls and now disappear from the ballot. As Calvin Falcon says, no mas. John Rustad had let it be known that there are some United candidates doesn't actually want. And the likes of Todd Stone and Shirley Bond have announced they're out. A few Conservative candidates have had time to shift as well. So much happening so quickly with the election campaign upon us, Robin.
And we've had some big announcements on the South Island. Stephen Andrews is going to run in Oak Bay Gordon Head for the BC Conservatives. John Wilson has come out to run in Esquimalt-Metchosin. John Wilson, the business leader in the community. And that's a big get for the BC Conservatives in terms of credibility.
No
and,
kidding.
you know, in these particular situations, we didn't have a BC United candidate in Oak Bay Gordon Head. And as it happens, we don't have a BC United candidate running, or never did have a BC United candidate running out in North Saanich and the Islands, which is an interesting race as well. Because out there we have a lawyer by the name of David Busch who has run in other campaigns, and he's been building very hard towards building a machine to take on the incumbent. The incumbent in this case is the Green Party. Now, Adam Olsen has stepped away, so it's not the incumbent Green that's running there. It really is going to be, I believe, a one-on-one with the NDP, and we'll hear what David Busch has to say.
I see us hopefully winning the riding. It's going to be a hard fight through and through. As you said, it was previously held by the Greens, but we have a strong Conservative base on that riding. And there's also strong interest in change, from housing to healthcare to the cost of living. These are issues that the NDP and the Greens who've been representing that riding, have been working on for 8 years, and things have only gotten worse. The housing is more expensive. There are more drug overdoses. The cost of living has gone up, and there are fewer doctors. They've had 8 years to fix these problems, and instead it's gotten worse. It's time for a new direction. It's time for a new voice, and it's time to get these issues addressed and fixed.
Would it be fair to say that you've got a bit of a jump in your step after all the developments over the last few days? Is it going to make your life a little bit happier on the campaign trail?
It's certainly a lot of good news, and it's making things much, much better for us.
So Angus Reid were the very first to come out with an opinion poll after the big Kevin Falcon announcement, and that showed a neck-and-neck race with the Conservatives slightly in the lead. Pollster Sachi Curl has had more to say about this race. She says, "There's a real sense the land is not strong, as they say in the politics. On housing, healthcare, drug crisis, and more, it's at best a split, and at worst, a lot of discontent on whether BC's on the right or wrong track."
In contrast, another polling company says the right-wing merger has hardly made a difference, and the NDP is still ahead, although it's still very tight. According to Palace data, by the way, who's that? Anyway, I guess there's people are all going to be coming out of the woodwork, hey? So they're saying BC NDP is at 44%, BC Conservatives 43%. BC Greens 11%. I still maintain, I'm telling you that those Greens are going to affect this election. Latest seat count modeled out by Palace polling, NDP 47 seats, that's minus 10. Conservatives 46 seats, of course that's plus 46. And Greens 0 seats. They're calling for Greens to be wiped out. In other words, a hung parliament. We'll be sure to keep our eyes peeled on this. But let's maybe, just let's go out a little farther than our province, shift over to the federal scene, where former BC Premier has been making some noise.
She has. She's been making some noise in France, apparently, John. Wouldn't you know, where she's been out working on her French. She wants to improve her French comprehension and delivery with the idea, we hear, of jumping into a race if and when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau decides to take his walk in the snow and walk away. In other words, Christie would like to be the Prime Minister. When the word came down about this big idea, the federal political scene, our Rumble Room viewers quickly made their feelings felt. Marilyn wrote, well, if this is for real, the federal political front will become very interesting. And Zach writes us, I remember her supporting the Trans Mountain Pipeline, so at least she's not like the current government, who were anti-oil, anti-LNG, anti-pipeline, and anti-private sector.
I have to say, after 2.5 years of doing this, Robin, for you and I, these Christy Clark rumors have generated more comments than I've seen on our Victoria Rumble Room. And, you know, we're hearing from a lot of people who do not have good memories with Christy Clark as our former premier. And man, oh man, have they made their feelings felt. Alex writes, hard to believe anyone would vote for Christy when they discover what a terrible job she did as premier. Ken is pretty dramatic when he writes, I'll stick pins in my eyes. Don't do that, Ken, please. But he'll stick pins in his eyes before I support Clark as Liberal Party leader.
And yeah, there's some people with pretty strong feelings out there. We had people talking about alternatives to Justin Trudeau who do not go by the name of Christy Clark as well. And we had a comment from G. G stands for something. G writes us, they're not considering it, are they? I'll vote for Singh if that happens. Carney would be fine, though. And we also hear from Busy Byrne. Now, that would look good on a birth certificate, I think. Busy Byrne. Anyway, he writes, no way she would win. She was a minor political player. There was Jolie, Freeland, Arnott, and Fraser, who are much better qualified and a lot less corrupt. So who is going to take Justin Trudeau's place, if not Christie? Well, I think there is a fairly long list of possibilities, although you wonder who could possibly turn the tide at this point when the Liberals are behind in every national opinion poll, and they've been behind for the last year. Recently, every province in the country is saying they would vote Conservative, at least by some margin, including the province of Quebec. So let's get more information, more perspective on this phenomena that's taking place, where there is speculation about the Prime Minister walking and maybe a changing of the guard in a year's time in terms of what happens with Pierre Poilievre and the federal Tory party. Let's go to our favorite columnist, Mark MacDonald from the Business Examiner. Let's zoom him in.
You know, it could, but Trudeau is an enigma, right? I mean, I don't know how any human being takes that kind of well-deserved abuse, to be honest, and just keeps rolling. Like, is it his goal to get everybody in Canada to hate him? You know, but if you look at the farm team there, what's behind them? Are you going to put Mr. Speaker? You're going to put her in there? You're going to put you know, who are we going to vote for that? Mr. Speaker, it just drives me crazy. And then the Bank of Canada.
That was a wonderful Christopher Freeland imitation, by the way. Those who are not initiated, that was beautiful, beautifully done, beautifully done.
And what I was interested in, and I had conservative friends say this: if Mark Carney was to come in, I'd consider voting Liberal. Now, whether Carney could distance himself from the Trudeau policies because he is. You know, he's been a gas tax advocate himself. But if you had somebody like that, whether you could draft him from the outside, there's nobody from within. I mean, that's why I say with freedom.
Yeah. Talking about templates, yeah. we saw that on the BC Liberal side with Wilkinson. Brilliant, dull. We saw it with the Liberals with Ignatieff. Yeah. Brilliant, dull. Both lost. Carney's in the same place.
Yeah.
If they put Carney, bye-bye. Well, for 10 years.
A friend of mine would say, you know, wouldn't you love to see Ken Dryden run for Prime Minister? He said, He says, but oh my goodness, he's the most boring man in Canada.
Said it. Yeah, all you have to do is meet Ken Dryden. You know what you're going to think about that.
Oh, I'd vote for Ken Dryden just because of those pads.
Yeah, I've met him a couple of times, and I like him better as a hockey player. But to follow on John's point, we're learning so much about ourselves, watching with fascination across the border what they're doing in the United States, how they use catchphrases so effectively, and now the Democrats are getting as good as the Republicans at using catchphrases and using social media and little sound bites and clips, and not doing interviews, particularly with the gallery, but basically getting their messages out any way they can. And we're seeing that done quite a bit in Canada now, and I think Pierre Poilievre has been extremely successful at doing it. Now we're seeing a lot of other politicians looking over their shoulder and thinking, geez, I better catch up with this. Do you see the trends moving forward in not just in the United States, but right across the world based on maybe these models, and how, again, this is all stuff that's very transferable on social media?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, like, because Trump, for example, attacks the media, right? I never think that works well, but somehow it's resonated. So I'm not saying that Poilievre attacks the media, but you saw some of
He
his
sure attacks the CBC, though. He doesn't like the CBC.
Yeah, but remember the reporter in Oliver, the Apple guy?
The Apple guy, yeah.
So I think that resonates with people. These guys come across like pit bulls, and they're not asking questions; they're making points. And so I think it's great to have contrary opinions, but when it reaches the rhetoric height of it does in the States, I mean, what point do you start just ripping the country apart? Like, I have friends, good friends, and family in the NDP, right? I still do. I like talking to them. I have coffee with them. We talk about issues, right? But most people, you would never think of doing that, right? I think it's healthy. So here's a conversation I had with a prominent NDP member, won't tell you who it was. And I said, he says, how come you guys, he's talking about non-NDPers, your election thing. And I said, you have it all figured out. He looks at me with bemusement. And I said, all you do, you cater to the people that are homeless, have no jobs. And you tell them, we're going to give you a free house. We're going to give you $20 more a month for welfare. And we're going to give you free drugs. That's what they do now. They're not interested in the middle class as far as the votes. They're definitely not interested in the business voice, because they know business issues, and there's not enough business people to vote to get them in. So that's what's happened now, right? So the housing issue is all about, they'll never find a solution for it unless you take a hard line. That's their voting support.
Mark, a couple of points, since you're a media guy and we're interviewing a media guy.
Mm-hmm.
Two characteristics of the way of the TikTokization of media.
Yeah.
There, made a new word. Thank you, Robin. That being in the States that I hope does not transfer to Canada. That being the lying and the disrespect. Yeah. And I think all of us as Canadians have generally agreed to disagree in a polite way. Maybe that can ramp up, and we occasionally have intense times in our legislatures where people are yelling, but then afterwards they go and have a beer with each other. Right. I really hope that the lying and this and the disrespect do not transfer up here. And then thirdly, which I think is a ticking time bomb, is the artificial intelligence applied to this stuff, in which we will not know at any point whether what we're watching is real or not.
The last point is a genuine concern, right? Some of this stuff is so good. They can take your voice. They could watch this and copy our voice, right? Regarding the line, and I get frustrated watching Question Period in Ottawa, because Trudeau never answers a question. It's like he actually never does. And so what is devolved into is whoever can yell the loudest with the biggest lie. They don't even try to defend or debunk the other person. So it's not even a debate. It's just their own statement, And I don't know. It's troubling to me, right? I mean, it took years ago, when we were in the newspaper business still doing well. Editorial people bemoaned USA Today, And they said, there's nothing been more destructive to newspapers in North America than USA Today. And I would say, why? And they said, because it's shortened everything down into 6 paragraphs. So there's no length or depth to thought or a story. You get captions. And everybody follows suit, right? Now we're down to TikTok.
And it points to the change in the way people are receiving their information. So people who maybe have a business bent might be regularly watching us. But people who don't really care for business or don't like anybody who they smell as being too right-wing, they're not going to watch us. They're going to watch other shows that reinforces their point of view. And I guess what I'm saying here, Mark, is that traditionally we had newspapers, TV, news, people would all watch it, and the reporters would try to find some balance. But it is moving away from this axiom, and we're seeing a lot of funneling news information to the wider population. And the Business Examiner, I imagine, has to try to wade through this as well. The numbers are going down for TV news and for newspapers. I'm sure when you're in a niche like the Business Examiner, you have an audience, so you've got to be able to move with the times and go online with them as well. So how do you survive in this atmosphere? What's the forecast longer term for publications like yours and other niche publications and other niche points of view that still want to be heard?
Well, you asked about 3 questions there. That's good. So our son bought the company 4 years ago. And what he's doing is he's moved away from the monthly magazines that we used to do. We had them printed and distributed through Canada Post. And he's going online with online newspapers. So he's building a database so you're going direct. If you think back to in our earlier days, it'd be like direct mail, right? So you have people on those lists and they're automatically funneled your news. And that's your distribution network. And that's working well. A lot of the business that he does is on events like the MacDonald Business Excellence Awards, construction, commercial building awards throughout the province, and that. The other thing is, why would we turn into the media? If you know that you're going to get fed a line, or the information is not valuable, researched, even any attempt to be fair, why would you tune in? My news jaunt every morning goes through about 6 websites. Boom, 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 boom. I check into the Vancouver Sun 1 time a day, only in the morning, to find out what the headlines are. I'm not interested in their slant on news. And you know, if you explain it to you this way, when I started, we were prohibited as a reporter. I was 18 years old at the daily paper. We were prohibited from putting any opinion in a news story, right? Like, it's a fireable offense. But now so what? At some point, the reporters started to inject their opinions in, thinking they'd make a reputation for themselves or a more delightful story. Well, you become more reliable. So now everything's filled with opinion. Back then, if you had the guts to put your picture at top the column, then you could say whatever you want. But now all the news stories like that. So that's why it's unreliable. This CBC is bought and paid for by the federal government, right? But all media, with you guys accepted, and Business Examiner, has received funding from the federal government. So every message that they come out, they realize, oh, this is my major customer. I better not tick them off. So there has to be some kind of a return to reliable news. Maybe it starts with the Rumble Room.
Attaboy. I love it.
That's a great response. We love that. That's great.
Who's telling the truth?
You'll note we didn't actually ask Mark about Christy Clark jumping into the race because she hasn't done anything yet officially. Nobody knows what she's going to do. We don't want to speculate or over-speculate, but certainly when that happens, we will get back on board and get right back into that story. On that happy note, though, John, it's time to wrap it up another Rumble Room, and perhaps you could tell folks again how they can follow us and watch us on all the various platforms.
Absolutely. So much political information because, it really is every day that a far west past premier goes to France to learn French. That happens all the time. Anyway, hey, listen, some weeks we've been more of a general news magazine, done some things on local cultural institutions like Pagliacci's 45th anniversary a couple weeks ago. But with all these big election stories at hand, it's fun to take a deep dive into politics. And we really hope our viewers, you guys, we hope you're enjoying the ride. And guess what? You can enjoy more of this ride if you join us on X/Twitter, Facebook, YouTube is where all of our videos are housed. Absolutely, you can listen to us while you're biking, riding, swimming, all those things. And with an audio podcast, we're on Instagram and we are also on TikTok. That's it for another show. I can't wait for the next one. I remain your Croatian sensation, Yanni Boris Ladislav Juricic.
And I'm Robin Adair, and I encourage you, as always, to rumble on.